Hey everybody, welcome back. Bitcoin hitting a new high. Now we're seeing some cracks and some moves here we're going to talk about, but we should discuss the ES. And let's clean this all up for a second and just get into just this little move that we're seeing right here, right? We're not seeing a whole heck of a lot ahead of what? PPI tomorrow, as we're all aware. So we're going to just want to watch and see how this plays out. I think there's a couple key levels here that we should pay attention to. So I'm going to point them out. We are starting to go a little sideways here, aren't we? So I think it's important to start looking at support and resistances again. We were putting that off for a little bit. And the reason was I just really didn't have any value to add. We were just basically staring at a chart and saying, look, it's going higher. But now we're starting to get to that definable level. And I think the best place to start really might even be where we start on Tuesday. And we started at 8:30. As if you've been watching for some time, we always mark off the 8:30 level, specifically the 1 and the 5. For our intensive purposes right now, we're going to mark off the 5 just because it's easier and we don't have to drill into it as much. But this is where CPI came out. And this is where the algorithms decide to play for the first 5 minutes. And that usually gives you a definable role. And you can see that. Hopefully you can see it. But I mean, here's your support line. Let's make that an arrow. Here's your support line. Right, and resistance, resistance, resistance until what? Support. So 5208 is definitely an area you're going to want to watch tomorrow. Let's see, you get a hot PPI number and it comes down. You're going to want to watch that line right there as well, and we're going to want to see how that plays out. And then, of course, you have the low, which is 5176. These two lines are certainly levels that I would watch tomorrow. If we drill into this and make it an hourly and just zoom out a little bit more, you're also getting some other stuff in here that's becoming a little definable. Now, we're going to get rid of these for a moment. And we're just going to look at how this is playing out and coming across. So you are starting to make smaller incremental moves higher. Now, these aren't set in stone by any stretch. It's only an hourly chart. But what you are doing is you're forming a fan. And you see how the trajectory of this is changing, meaning that as it's dropping, it's not dropping. People would say, well, that is higher lows. Yes. But what's also happening is when it drops, we're just not dropping the same. We're just not dropping the same magnitude to the same level. And the reason that this could happen, there's only one way, that the low bounces are actually happening sooner. If they were happening later, then these angles wouldn't be doing what they were doing. They'd be going out further, right? Just makes sense. I mean, you could probably look at cloning this one for a moment. Let's just clone it and see where that would lie. And you're probably going to see it lie like right up in here. And so you can see like your major channel, maybe that's 5280. I don't know. I don't know that I really buy that right now. I think you're better off just looking at the lows and kind of going from there. Where we would really focus on is just, are we able to get a close above this? Because we've really only gotten one green close above there. So we take all this off for a second. And what we'd want to see is a close above 52, 52.75. So I think those levels that I just gave you are rather important, and you might want to watch those tomorrow. If we take a look at NQ, we're going to drop that down to the ES levels. And you'll note I left these on all day long, and people always say, well, why do you keep those levels on? Well, I mean, this is pretty obvious why you keep those on, right? You could see the battle all day, and then you break, retest, breaks, and you could not get back over, complete rejection on Wednesday, and then at the end of the day, you start moving again. But that level was rejected today, right at the close of business, 4 p.m. And you can see right here. So what's happening? Support is becoming resistance during the working hours. Now, during the other hours, it's a little bit changed, right? So I think that's also important. RTY just cannot get it together. We have all these levels drawn, and you're still really, let's clean all this off, and we'll start over. You're still really in that range, like from CPI, which came in a little hot, and people were surprised. Again, what you always want to do is you want to watch the bond market, which that's what we watched today, and you could see the move at 1 o'clock today as well on the NQ. Let's go take a look at that so you can see that and what I'm referring to. So if you take the NQ and you look at that 1 o'clock level, you'll see a nice move there. That was basically the 30-year. You also had the 1130. And the 1130 really didn't do too much. You could say it bottomed, but that was the 17-week bond auction. That's not going to move you as much. In my opinion, it's not. It's more the 30-year. But if we come here and take a look at the 5, and you can just see that massive drop after hours. But if you come here and take a look at roughly what happened at 1 o'clock, you pushed a little bit. Not a lot. It was really the NQ that wound up lifting and some of the big winners. What I don't like, and we're going to talk about NVDA for a second here, and then we should get into the Bitcoin names. But really what I don't like is this kind of stuff. And this is where you need to be super careful, because what they're doing is they're playing a lot of games. So in other words, last night we close up, we reverse, we flip this doji, which we talked about ad nauseum. You always want to watch dojis and these hammers because they are signs of uncertainty. And even the names that you don't like, you can trade on the long side if you understand these patterns. And I did that today with coin. I don't like coin at all here, but 5 numbers and 4 letters, I'll trade anything that moves. So you see how you flipped up here, right? And then what do? They gap you down, they whack it. That's just not nice. And then when you sit here and you look at it this way, here, watch. Let's get rid of the after hours for a second. So we're going to clean up these levels and just look at what they did. So in other words, you're gapping up, and then you have the complete rejection on Friday, which was a 13% move. And please remember this statement. When you have massive volatility, and yes, 13% is massive volatility, and unless the CEO keeled over, that is massive unwarranted volatility on any name to just have a top to bottom 13% move on zero news. No matter how high you are, you have to understand that there's always what we refer to as a reckoning. Gaps up on Tuesday on a poor number, comes down, doesn't gap fill, rips, and then what happens? After hours, see where you closed right here? Nice, strong, and let's blow this up so you can see this. This is called a Marbuzu white, pretty much. I mean, it's all there, except you have a little bit of a wick. You want one of those firm bars that has no wick on it, and they're basically called, well, not basically, they're called Marbuzu whites, and they usually denote a change in the trend, and they usually follow. The down ones are black, the up ones are white. It is what it is, but you can see how that played out. Now, that was your high. This was your open, all right? And then from here, let's move that to the top. Watch what happens when it got to the top and how it rejected that level. You can see it very clearly there. Now, this is what they did after hours. They ran it all night, right? So 8 o'clock, everyone thinks they're going to get that 7 a.m. pop, and then they just did the complete Matumbo, could never get above it, broke it. Once you break the previous close from the night before and you were up, it's go time. You got to go. You have to get out. So I always use the 7 o'clock level as a demarcation line because that's when retail gets in. 4 a.m. is when Asia gets involved. But if you start breaking that 7 o'clock level where all the think or swim guys start getting in there and they get all giddy because it was up and now they can get it cheaper. Remember, there's no free lunch. And then it starts breaking, you pretty much know. And then what they did was they just gapped you down. And that was pretty much the end of it. It was just panic city. And you just got to a level and they tried to trade back to it at the end of the day. We'll see what tomorrow brings. I do think they're making life fairly easy for you here for tomorrow. And I do want to talk about some other names, specifically Bitcoin names, because there's a lot going on there. But I do think that they made life fairly easy for you tomorrow with this doji, because it's real simple. If you don't get above the top of that doji tomorrow, which is where they're saying that 915 we got to today. How about that? So if you don't get to that 915 level, I can actually drop that to there, then you know that you have some kind of issue. If you can't flip that tomorrow, there's probably really no reason besides just intraday trades to be that involved with it. The most interesting names were the Bitcoin names, and there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, the ones that really are normally rallying aren't really rallying. In other words, the CLSK names and the Maraning, they usually are the ones that are cratering early. And the reason for that is because they are the miners, and with the halvening, their costs actually go up and they become less profitable companies. And we all know this at this point, right? But you can just see that literally every day, if you were doing it from earnings on Mara and you just start looking at these, I mean, every single day except a few of these rallies, you're falling down. So it's just been almost like a money market short. It's been so obvious and so easy to short these names. Today, I actually was on the long side of these, even though I didn't want to be. I started out short, and then I just saw these flip. And this actually got offset by something I was doing on coin, which I'll show. I got asked a lot to show some trades again, so I'm going to show you a live trade that we did and how we got in. But I was actually shorting this today as it was rallying up and shorting it, and then just reversed. And then I started to realize that everyone's just figured out the game. See, like that's the thing. If you remember that video we did a month ago, and I am going to cut out that clip, that way I could link the actual way to do this. I talk about it a lot, the reflexivity of it. And basically everyone figured it out at this point. So once everybody figures it out, the trade's busted, right? Because everybody's doing it. So once we realized that, we just went long. Like you just popped out. It was a very simple trade, traded it up, and then just blew it out and got out of the way. Because I really don't want to own this. I mean, no offense against, eco miners, but it's just not really my wheelhouse, not the types of names I want to stay in. And we did the same thing with Mara. It just presented an opportunity to go long. So we took it. Coin, I'm not a huge fan of. At the time of recording this, I'm actually short coin. And I also have puts that we did quite nicely on today. Let me actually, give me 1 second here. So first, thank you very much for your comments about the editing and that you really don't care. It means a lot. I can get more content out to you faster. So please keep the comments coming. I do read them all and I do respond to them all. But it really means a lot when you say things, because then I know which way to go. It's why I'm going to show a live trade tonight, so you can see exactly how it was thought out before it was done, and then how we executed it, and then how we knew to execute that trade. But if you take a look here, 255 puts, not everybody in the community wants options. If I'm doing options and they're at the money weeklies, I'm usually shorting stock at the same exact time. I like the flexibility of shorting stock. Not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants unlimited risk, obviously. But if you're watching it, you can handle it. So anyway, I'll get into that later. But coin puts up 20%, boom, trimmed. So whether you're trimming 20, 80% doesn't really matter. But you look at that, look at that. You have this and you think you're great. And then you come in, now you have this little nightmare. So, you're up 2.5% and it's reversing. Now, this is where this trade gets super interesting. Pardon my voice. This is where it gets super interesting. What happened at 1 o'clock today? Bond market, right? So it almost was like at 105, somebody was waiting to see if the treasury market was going to rally Bitcoin or going to rally these names. And once 1 o'clock hit, it was just dumping. I mean, if you really go through this, once we got here, that was it. It was just straight dumping for an hour and a half. And I just kept waiting for this to kind of bounce and form, because the real money is going to be made when it cracks, like when it really cracks. This is peanuts compared to what you can really make with the short when it cracks. So I'm not really interested in this. I was interested in the other money, and the money that I'm super interested in is right here. So once I got to this level, and I'll show you, but once I got to here as well, I'm like, okay, this thing could start actually breaking, right? So I actually shorted into this, and then I wanted to see if it would crack, and we got the first, but I didn't get the waterfall I wanted. Now, maybe it's coming, maybe it's not coming. We're going to talk about that in a moment, specifically when it gets into MSTR and what I think is going to trigger it. But what you're seeing right now, and what I think you're seeing, is an opportunity when you start looking at this and you start seeing how this is acting. Are we even below the 5 yet? And let's get rid of the pre and the post and look at this. There's so many names that actually have news. And the answer is, let's clean this all off. Yes, you did. So on this chart right here, this is coin, and this is a 3, a 5, and an 8-day moving average. I'm saying it because this is still dark. I have not had time to convert all these over to dark mode. But if you go and take a look at that and go, well, how many times have we been below the 5 in March? How about never? You never got to close below the 5-day moving average in March, okay? And then you go back here and you can see some closes of 1 day right in here at 169 in that level, right after earnings, and then you began the run and you didn't get any. So is this a change? I have no idea. It certainly looks like one to me, and it certainly was worth playing, specifically how many days down we had. Again, the real money, you can see it, is that when you start breaking these kinds of levels and you get through 245, this starts trying to rally, can't do it, and starts rolling. I think that that's really where you can get involved here. But there was a very simple trade today. And again, what I'm doing is I like playing flip the hammer, most of it. So you see these hammers right here? When you flip these, you can really move, because this is all, when you have wicks like this is all price rejection. Same thing, if you get through this wick tomorrow, for example, let's say that you're like, I think you're crazy being short, right? Let's say you get through that. Once you're through that, the power of something like that is pretty substantial, because wicks are price rejection. Therefore, once it's all cleaned up, you know where to go. You don't really have any sellers. You know that, right? So the same thing here. So once you flipped, that was pretty much it. So here, take a look at this. I'm going to tell you how this is going to work for coin. Do you remember when MSTR did a secondary? Because that was the one everybody wanted to own. It did a secondary down here, and that was the end of it. Okay, it's 600 points higher. None of this makes sense. None of it. You don't deal with it from a rational standpoint. You deal with it from a money standpoint. Our job is to make money. If you flip this 61, you're going to push. If you get over the close from yesterday, you're going to push. So let me give you levels, because I'm finding that giving you levels earlier in the morning helps you move instead of watching me and then going, I missed it, he's too fast. Coin's pretty interesting off the open. But there is something interesting about that trade to me here. So it's certainly something I'm going to be watching and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with. All right, we're going to watch this. Yep, there it goes. That's what I thought I was going to do. Let's watch that coin. Yep, there it goes. I'm going to buy a little coin here. The coins, just let them do their thing for now, okay? I'm not really doing anything here. I still have that position, and I'm just watching it whack around for now. Take a look at coin. So very little to do here. Just let that push. I did pull something out on that move. I'm going to pull a little more out. I think. Pulled a little more out. Still holding this coin, letting it develop, which I really don't like. Really don't like this trade at all. And there goes coin, finally. And I'll just leave the rest of the coin on. What are we up? I'm up $4 or $5 on that. If we want to watch that high, right? We want to watch that level I have here. We're going to want to watch the high end of this. So pulling something off into this. Trimmed coin. Okay, you're holding. So there's no need for me to do anything with this. Coin looks good. Coin's probably going to push. I'm up $5 now on that. That's going to push, isn't it? All right. Out 100% of coin. Out the whole trade of coin. So still made some money despite the ad. This is a telltale sign of a blow off. A $3 move like that, that's a blow off. So now you can see how we played that and how we used the very simple pattern and how we just set it up ahead of time once you flipped to get in there. And I think that's very important. And I think we have a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy right now, but a lot of people are going to tell me, no, Bitcoin's the future. I'm not here to argue it. Obviously, the stock's been going up or the asset class has been going up every day. I just want to know where all you Bitcoin like fanboys were when it was down here and nobody wanted to touch it. But up here, everybody loves it. So just something to think about. If it's really a store of value, where was everybody down here? Where was everybody in here? But now everybody's got to get involved because of the ETFs. And I think this is a really good segue into a couple things. So first, I want to talk about MicroStrategies. And we were talking about this forming an all-time high, massive reversal, forming a hammer. So once again, I did the same exact trade I've been doing as I just buy calls every time you form these hammers at the top of charts, and it's been working. And it's going to probably continue to work until one day when it doesn't. The problem is the options are so expensive. I'm buying calls, and the calls I'm buying, I'm paying $100 a piece for them to get any kind of skin in the game, any kind of real delta on them. So, I mean, not everybody wants to do that, right? And I get that. So just avoid the trade. But this is really, truly acting. I'm going to clean all that off for a second. Like somebody's stuck. And there's a rumor going around now that someone is short over 15%. I have no idea. I quite frankly don't know how somebody would even know that since they don't have to report those. But that does make sense because there is no give back here whatsoever, like literally no give back. If you look at MSTR and you look at something like coin, you're getting a lot of give back, building, going sideways, breaking out, sideways, give back, give back, give back. You're not getting any of that here. And when you start looking at MicroStrategies and you go out there and you say, okay, well, how much do they have in assets? And you look at what they have in assets, and then you go, okay, well, what's the company worth? Well, the company was trading at about $150 to $200 before Bitcoin. And then you look at the Bitcoin holdings and what they're worth versus where the stock is. And it's almost the equivalent right now, I believe. Last time I looked, it was like it's trading at about $125,000 a Bitcoin, which is just absolute insanity. There's actually a firm out there that is actually short this and actually long Bitcoin. And it kind of makes sense. The market can stay irrational longer than we can stay solvent. And it's starting to make sense that somebody might be short here. And because what we're seeing is this over and over again. So now you have another one where they're going to say, hey, we have another $500 million on convertible senior notes. Well, who's out there right now? If you truly think about this, who's out there right now saying, you know what I need to do? I need something with a really low yield and a convert that I can do, or I could do this at 2,000 or wherever the heck he's going to price the convert. It doesn't make any sense. Right? Like, okay, you could pull it off once here and it sold down to 1050, right? Because people didn't understand that somebody was stuck. And that's what I think is happening here. So I think that this is basically seller. And don't get me wrong, it's a brilliant move. You're going to go to whoever is stuck and say, okay, we'll sell you a piece of this convert. These are the terms. And the terms will be awful and great for MicroStrategies, which is really smart. MicroStrategies goes out there, takes this capital, buys more Bitcoin, and now they have an asset. Now, whether Bitcoin stays at 70, goes to 700, or goes to 30 is completely irrelevant because what he's doing is he's converting his stock into Bitcoin, which really makes a lot of sense if this is trading at roughly 125 or 127 a share of Bitcoin, right, at that price, and Bitcoin's really at 73. So it's actually a brilliant move of what he's doing, the conversion into Bitcoin. And at the same time, he kind of has these people stuck because no one is out there right now going, you know what I really need? I need more exposure to Bitcoin, but I need it in the form of some kind of debt structure that gives me very little upside. Right? Just buy the stock if you thought it was going to go up. You wouldn't want the convert. So just something to think about because I do think that that's what's happening out there. And a couple others out there that we should probably talk about as well. Another one that would make sense would be to talk about X. Now, you're seeing this trade up after hours, and I will tell you that these guys have guts that are buying this after hours. I did think about it, but then I just don't have the guts. And the reason for it is because the Biden administration has come out and said, we're really going to look into this. And the union is saying that this is not something that they wanted. They weren't even consulted on it. This is not something you do in an election year, especially when Trump's out there saying this is the worst deal possible for the unions out there. Trump even has Democratic senators out of PA agreeing with him that this is an absolute disaster to take the steelworkers union and put it in the hands through X in Japan and leave it up to them on what they're going to pay. I do agree with this. I think this is absolutely insane that they didn't even discuss this with everybody. But nevertheless, here we are. So you have a bunch of people that are trapped in here. You can see when the news hit. I think this can go from bad to worse, quite frankly. And I think it can get worse. I don't know that here is where you want to short it, maybe on the rally back up, but certainly news will come out there and you have to have patience with these. You never know how they're going to go. I remember this iRobot. I couldn't believe that the EU was really going to block a vacuum cleaner deal, but look how long this took before it happened. Now, I don't expect this to happen that long because IRBT, again, they just absolutely destroyed the company. And that's just from all the regulators. But what does this mean for X? This is a talking point. This is something that you're going to get on a pulpit and talk about the American worker. And they're going to talk about this for some time. Both sides are going to talk about this. And the bottom line with it is this is just going to be a playing card. And I just don't see this happening. So I think you're going to see a lot of pressure there. McDonald's, they were at a UBS conference and they were talking about China. And China's not buying Big Macs. So they're saying that sales are way off. And this is a pretty substantial crack here in the chart today for what they came out with. And not what everybody was expecting, but if you kind of take a look at that 294 level, overlay that with what's happening right here, and you can see not only did you crack there, but here's your 12, your 22, and your 55. I use a 12, a 22, and a 55. You should use what you're comfortable with. But you're closing at that low of the day. I mean, that's just a textbook that you're going to want to watch tomorrow. Of course, you're going to have to watch PPI, but I would watch this for McDonald's. And then we are watching Hood, and let's drop this here. And you're trading up after hours, and you can kind of see it bonking around up here. Net deposits came in substantially higher than expected. Net deposits came out roughly at that 18 3/4 level was the high on this thing. Give me 1 second. I'll get you the net deposits. 3.6 billion. So you got up to here, this 18 3/4. So that's what I would look at right there and go from there. It's what I meant to say when I said net deposits was to give you the resistance point. So I had a little trade in this after hours, candidly. At the time of recording this, I'm already out. I don't really understand the story enough to understand why that net deposit number is so got the market so giddy. What I will say is that technically speaking, you're seeing rotation. And we can talk about this in a couple different ways, but I think that the easiest way would just be to look at the major sectors. So what I'll do is just drop in the 11 and then we'll drop this down to here and just take a look at this on a 1 minute time frame. We'll get rid of the pre and the post and just take a look at how this is playing out. And let's just drop this to the 13th and you can see what's leading. Energy, XBI's bouncing, financials. I've got the staples in here a couple times, cloud, and you just see where the SPY is and then what's dropping, the XLRE, XLK, and the SOX. So we are seeing rotation and it is going into energy and we're seeing that out there right now. We're certainly seeing that in some of these names. The easiest name to go out there with at this time would just be to take a look at what you're seeing out of Gush and how Gush is trying to break out here. Pretty candidly, you're setting up here pretty nicely. And then you start going through these like the XOP. Let's clean this off. And maybe PPI will shed some light on this tomorrow as to why we're seeing this happen. But XOP, which is the gas exploration's moving, XLE's moving. And you just look at some of these names like MPC, you're hitting all-time highs today. That's a clear breakout. Doesn't get more obvious than something like that. And we're just seeing this all over the place. This is something that we bought in the community down here. I think we paid 56. It's right around where Buffett keeps buying it. He wants to own 50-something% of the company. And his little areas like right in here, it's pretty easy trade. He seems to buy around that 56 and for whatever reason starts dumping around that 65 level. But, maybe it won't dump there one day. Who knows? Let's get this back. But, I want to show this. Instead, we'll do it this way because I think this is really important as well because you're seeing even the big dogs start to break out. And when you start to see the big dogs start to break out, starts making you wonder, start to see it with CVX, PSX as well. So I don't know. This is not what you see when tech is supposed to be leading. And certainly not the stuff that you lead when you start looking at like how Apple acted today and how fast Apple rolled. And Microsoft, Microsoft you would think would have done a little bit better, but once again, you have that rejection. Oracle overall, it looked like it was going to finally go and break out. And now you've got this setup here, which is just absolutely gross. and you're just unable to get over that line. And this has just been a real barn burner on which way this is going to cut. That is it.